Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the banning of Jewish ritual slaughter in Europe, a trend that is making its way through Europe and making it illegal to shecht an animal. Simply put, slaughtering kosher meat is illegal in many European countries, and Greece's highest court just confirmed that. I'm not one to search for and then find Jew hatred around every corner or under every rock. You know that already. But in Greece, I've found it right out in the open. The recent decision by the highest court in Greece to let stand the banning of kosher and halal slaughtering of meat is an obvious and direct attack against Jews and Muslims. It's an attack on the freedom of Jews and Muslims to practice their religions. No obfuscation of intent at all, no interpretation needed. The thinking is clear. Animal rights are more important than religious freedom. The animal lobby is more powerful than the Jewish lobby. Greece is just one example. This deprivation of religion and religious freedom is happening all over Europe. Jewish communities are dwindling. In many of these countries, there is no one left to defend the rights of the few who remain. In this case, in Greece, the Greek court ruled on a ministerial exception for religious slaughter. The exception was to the Greek law that required the stunning of an animal before slaughter. So there was an exception for the Jews. Jews needed that exception, as did Muslims, and they relied on it because Shechitah, as it is known, or kosher ritual slaughter, is not kosher if the animal is either stunned or anesthetized. So, too, according to halal, the ritual Muslim animal slaughter. The original purpose of the ministerial exception was specifically to create a balance enabling kosher slaughtering while preventing animal cruelty. But now, in a turnabout, the court has ruled against the very balance and has forbidden all slaughter without stunning. In a move that can only be described as the height of absurdity, the court writes, and I'm quoting, "The government should regulate the issue of slaughtering animals in the context of worship in such a way as to ensure both the protection of animals from any inconvenience during slaughter and the religious freedom of religious Muslims and Jews living in Greece," unquote. Really? They just ruled against that very compromise they called for in their decision. Greece was once a great thriving Jewish community. But today, as we all know, Greece is not the center of the world's kosher slaughtering industry. Salonika, also known as Thessaloniki, was once a great city of Greece. It was the city of Greece, and the Jews were a major feature of that city. In 1902, let's say, for instance, 126,000 residents were there, 62,000 were Jews. It was once upon a time the center of Jewish publishing. The ports in Salonika were closed on Shabbat because the industry was controlled by the Jews. In the late 1920s and early 30s, Jews of Salonika were lured to Haifa to work the port there. They were better skilled, better motivated than the locals in Palestine at that time. Before the Holocaust, Salonika was home to 55,000 Jews, just the city. Fewer than 2,000 survived the Nazi murder machine there. Today, there are hardly 1,000 Jews in all of Greece. Greek Jews are not slaughtering very many animals. This is not an industry. And that is why the religious exception was a good solution. There's no reason to insist on a change in the law, just create the exception. Unfortunately, Greece does not want an exception. It's part of a trend charging through Europe. The trend is to protect animals against cruelty above religious freedom, above the religious freedom of Jews and Muslims. Now, some might argue that these trends and laws are really anti-immigrant rulings against Muslims. That might be correct. That is really an anti-Muslim movement, and tiny, powerless Jewish communities are caught in the net of that movement. But look at the trend. The European Union countries are now banning kosher slaughter, and these are the ones that they include. These are just a few: Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Slovenia, and Estonia. In 2011, the Netherlands banned kosher slaughter, but then in 2012, they reversed their decision. In Poland, 2013 banned Shechitah. They reversed the ban, but only for kosher meat export. So you could do it to do it inclusively. The laws here are effectively preventing and dissuading Jews from moving into these countries. Even more sinister is a parallel trend emerging in these countries. It too is an attack on Jews and Muslims. I'm referring to a move to ban non-surgical medical circumcision, Brit Milah. Those lobbying to prevent this ancient Jewish and Muslim custom assert that it is a child abuse and child mutilation, and they are outspoken and persuasive. Preventing cruelty is an important value, no question. Certainly to newborns, Jewish babies, as well as for animals, preventing cruelty. These are Jewish values, preventing cruelty, universal values. I think everyone would agree to that. But now a compromise must be reached. Accommodations must be enacted. It would do Greece well to emulate Poland in this way, to legislate religious exception for slaughter and ritual slaughter, and put a ban on the industry and the export of meat if that's the problem. I don't think, however, it will happen. I don't think that the powers that be are interested in compromise, because banning Shechitah is actually a ritual red herring. I've also been thinking about the future. What kind of future? Well, cyber war. Cyber war is the war of the future. Before an all-out cyber war, there will be battles. The battles are called cyberattacks. The best we can do about these attacks is arm ourselves in proper protection. Cyber warriors are hard to find. Anonymity is one of their prime objectives. They are ideologues. They are guns for hire. There's no specific age or modus operandi, MO. These attackers do not fit into neat systems of organization. They range from nations to special interest groups to corporations to governments to clubs to solo practitioners. Sometimes several clusters join together to perpetrate their attacks. Sometimes they collaborate, and sometimes they work against one another, sometimes for one another. For some cyber hackers, it's a game, and they're thrill seekers. For some, it's all too real. For some of us, from individuals to nations, cyber attacks bring about ruination. Iran was hit recently by a very successful cyber attack, and it was a brilliant one. Iran. The target was the gasoline fueling stations across the country. Every gas station in Iran, in the entire country, was hit by the hack. The simple result was long lines snaked around the country as no one was able to fill up on gas. It lasted actually for several days. This attack prompted a move by local Iranians to erect billboards in Isfahan, let's say, one of the largest cities in the country. The billboards condemned the Grand Ayatollah. That doesn't happen very often in Iran. Here's how the attack worked. All Iranians get a card, a gas card, it's like a credit card from the government that gives them a subsidy. Effectively, the card allows them to pay 5 cents a gallon for up to 15 gallons. After that, it's 10 cents a gallon. It's pretty cheap. This hack attacked the card system. Every time the Iranians used the card to fill up with gas, the number 64411 flashed, and then the word cyber attack. The number 64411 echo a previous attack that struck Iranian trains. That was in July, and attributed to a group called Indra, which is the Hindu god of war. That attack was discovered by Checkpoint, an Israeli company. Iran is not the only target, though, of Indra. Indra has also been responsible for attacks against Syria and the Iranian president Bashar al-Assad. Now, while the average person does not understand the significance of the digit 64411, the number has significance. For Iranians, the number was an annoyance, a part of their difficulty in refueling a car. For hackers, 64411 was the crux of their message. No number in cyber attack is random. Numbers have meaning for hackers. This particular number is the number for a hotline in the office of the Grand Ayatollah. 64411 is the number that the Ayatollah's office uses to handle questions concerning Islamic law. Hackers knew things that most analysts do not know. The hackers understand Iran. They were sending a message rejecting the very purpose and definition of Iran. They were rejecting the theocratic Islamic statehood of Iran in a country once called Persia and now is called the Islamic Republic of Iran. This hack, cyber attack on gas stations, was not random, and the calendar date was not random. It coincided exactly with massive protests by Iranians against fuel increases of 200% in 2019. These protests were so large at that point and so significant that they couldn't even be kept secret. Iranian government media actually reported that 200,000 people came to those 2019 protests. Those protests were met with brutal responses by the Iranian government. This hack caused long lines, this one, for long distances for up to 4 days later. Any number of groups could have perpetrated this cyber attack. Israel, of course, and Israelis are, of course, the prime candidates. Many Iranians have blamed the United States. But there is a long list of groups and countries that would benefit from disturbing daily life in Iran. No one was hurt by this, by the way, just inconvenienced. The cyber attack looks to me to be the second or maybe the third in the series. There was the trains, as I mentioned, the gas stations now. There was also an attack on ports recently. During that attack, traffic lights around the ports were all stopped, which caused an impossible delay for trucks moving in and out of the ports for days. This is a series of cyber attacks, and it will continue. Cyber attack 64411 will be back. It will find and hit another segment of Iran infrastructure. Its objective is to aggravate the average Iranian, that the people should demand change in leadership in Iran. The people are getting more and more aggravated, no question about it. Coming up next, points of view. First up, we'll want to look at a column published in the Chicago Tribune on June 7th. It was written by Lawrence Bulletin, and it's entitled, "Anti-Semitism Rears Its Ugly Head Again. Who Will Stand Up for Jews?" This column is important for several reasons. Most important, it is essential to see what is happening in Middle America, not just on the coasts. This is where the vast amount of important issues are unfolding and taking place, and it's worth seeing them and integrating them into our analysis. Next, this column expresses a real concern for the rise of anti-Semitism, for no other reason than that is a piece which is picked and published by the Chicago Tribune. We know that others are concerned about it too. Bulletin begins by setting the horrifying stage of anti-Semitism in Chicago. Unbridled fear pervading Chicago's Jewish community. Over the past few weeks alone, chants of "kill the Jews" were heard in the Chicago area, and bricks were thrown through synagogue window in Skokie. In Naperville, agitators stole and set on fire an Israeli flag, and attacked a car with Jewish children inside, events that led to 3 citations of disorderly conduct. The local Jewish high school student received a series of gruesome death threats and hate mail. Shocking events like those that have been taking place in our area also have been occurring across the country. In Los Angeles, diners were harassed at a local sushi restaurant with demands for those who are Jewish to identify themselves. In New York, one person was burned when attacked with fireworks during an altercation with protesters. In New York and Florida, identifiable Jews have been harassed and beaten. No wonder that some in Lakeview consider anti-Semitic a graffiti caricature accompanied by the words "Free Palestine" on the SoulCycle Fitness Center, on buildings near the Jewish Community Center and local synagogue. One cannot help but wonder if the location of the late May vandalism was intentional because of Lakeview's vibrant Jewish population. In response to the incidents that took place in Lakeview, Bulletin tells us the rabbi of a synagogue reached out to the responsible people and says, and writes the following: Rabbi David Wolkenfeld of Lakeview, Anshe Shalom Synagogue, wrote an open letter to whoever scrolled the message with a plea for comedy, hoping perhaps that we can find a way, those of us who love Israel and those of us who love Palestine, to export our ability to live together peacefully here in Chicago to the Middle East, rather than importing their strife and conflict to the streets of our city. This is a very good proposal. It shows how willing Jewish leaders are in trying to address anti-Semitism. But the biggest problem, of course, is that Jew haters do not think that they are doing the wrong thing. They actually think they're doing the right thing. And we're doing the wrong thing by supporting Israel. Bulletin concludes his op-ed explaining that Jews have always been involved in helping fighting oppression of others. But he wonders where others are when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism. He concludes, Jews have stood up strongly and loudly here in Chicago and across the country in support of justice for Black Americans, Asian Americans, and victims of Armenian genocide, and in the oppression of Islamophobia. We believe in a country where diversity is a strength, creating a society where all are truly welcome. Many have spoken out, notably President Joe Biden, who has said we must all stand together to silence these terrible and terrifying echoes of the worst chapters in world history and pledge to give hate no safe harbor. But far too many have maintained a deafening silence. Some have recognized that anti-Semitism is a social problem, have joined your Jewish neighbors in standing up and speaking out against the new surge in hate targeting Jews. Please join us and them at the AJCs, whereas the outrage, and raise awareness of Jews under attack. Bulletin raises a very good point. He is much more diplomatic than I would have been. I would have been even more forceful. I would suggest that people who remain silent in the face of these things are either hypocrites or closet Jew haters. Next up is a column from Boulder Jewish Times in Colorado. It was published on October 29, 2021. This too is a piece from the center of the country, not from either coasts. This column is a serious critique of another column that was published in Minneapolis, a column that actually critiques the New York Times column by Bret Stephens. The New York Times column called to task Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minnesota. The entire point of this piece is looking at the attacks against Israel that are often based on untruths and falsehood. The column is written by Bruce Ticker, and it's entitled, "Lies Our Anti-Israel Activists Are Telling Us." Bruce Ticker begins this way. Mary Christine Bather, a defender of U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, has a penchant for confusion. Try to make sense of the passage below. I can't. Malcolm pointed out that innocent Palestinians who live under military occupation are regularly killed by Israeli security forces and have no Iron Dome to protect them. Bather writes in a commentary for her hometown paper in Minneapolis, the Star Tribune. Malcolm represents St. Paul, Minnesota. A fair interpretation of that statement: Israel fires missiles into its occupied territories. However, the separate elements she cites contradict one another. Israel does not occupy Gaza, yet Gaza is often the origin for the missiles fired toward Israel. And most of those missiles are usually destroyed by Israel's Iron Dome's defense system. Israel pulled all of its troops and communities to aka settlements in 2005. In retaliatory strikes last May, Israel's missiles killed 240 Palestinians, as Bather asserts. The people of Gaza live under a military occupation operated by Hamas, which seized control of Gaza from the Palestinians 2 years later, in 2007. Many supporters of Israel will no doubt pounce on me for using the word occupation, but I am leaving it here for the sake of argument. The column, by the way, continues to pick apart the mistakes made in the other column. One should know that there are serious and important critiques of Israel, but when critiquing your argument has teeth only when you use truth and reality. Do not make up information. And this is actually what Ticker is trying to say. He concludes, speaking for myself, I do not object to Omar's religion, race, or gender, only to her acts as a congresswoman. Omar and Rashida Tlaib are currently the only Muslims in Congress. Tlaib's family immigrated from the West Bank and, like Omar, is harshly critical of Israel. If Omar feels threatened by the Star Tribune's headline, then surely she should understand how I feel when I see her friends spew distortions about Israel that could inspire dangerous people to harm Jews like myself. I think Ticker's right. Many people can relate to Ticker's conclusion. Well done. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show 6 cartoons today. The first is a meme and it pokes fun at both the COVID and Star Trek. No one really knows how long this pandemic will last, but everyone I speak to has an answer. Of course, it is never an answer based on solid information, and that's what this meme pokes fun at. The scene is on the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise. Captain Kirk asks Bones, "How long will the COVID-19 last?" Bones responds, "Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a politician." How true. I could never have created a funnier or more accurate depiction of our lives today. Next up is a terrific jab at Google, and they certainly deserve to be jabbed. We see a poster advertising jobs at Google. The poster reads, "Now hiring. No need to apply. We already have all your information." This is so true. This is not a conspiracy issue. Our phones are really listening to us. We have been warned. Next up are signs displaying a Kroger's supermarket advertisement or a price list. This is a classic example of conflicting signs. One sign reads, 4 for $5 on hot dog buns. The sign next to it on the hot dog buns reads, limit 3 bread items per customer. The caption reads, apparently Kroger is using Common Core math. I love it. I just love it. Here's a tweet from Pippi Longstocking. That's her Twitter name, her Twitter handle. This tweet is making a comment about British spelling and word pronunciations. It reads, in England, booster shot would be spelled Worcestershire shot. That's funny. We have all been deluged with crazy robocalls about our car's warranty. I don't even have a car, and I get as many as 12 calls per day sometimes. The picture is of Alexander Graham Bell, and the caption reads, on March 10th, 1876, Alexander Graham Bell made his first phone call ever, and moments later, he was notified that his car's extended warranty had expired. Finally, The world has changed so much in such a short time. This meme proves the point. There's a picture of a classic yellow rotary telephone. The meme reads, "Things nobody said in the 1980s. I lost my phone." In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Midday on the recent Saturday, Israel attacked an arms shipment in Syria, just west of the capital city. The arms were being moved from the area around Damascus, the capital of Syria, to Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. 5 people were killed. All were members of the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah. The weapons were going to Lebanon to further improve Hezbollah's weapons cache. Media throughout the Middle East covered the attack. Israel does not often comment on strikes, and this was no exception. Midday attacks are extremely rare. The night and night attacks are usually preferred. Night lends excellent cover to missiles, planes, drones, helicopters, all kinds of things. Israel uses many variables when deciding whether to strike during the day or night. One factor is whether there is another opportunity to hit the target or not. Another is whether the target is so important that it will shift the balance of power of the enemy and empower the enemy, and in this case, Hezbollah. In this attack, I would suggest that both issues were at play, and in the end, the weapons were destroyed en route in Syria during the day before they could be hidden or make their way into Hezbollah's hands. This strike taught Hezbollah that Israel's rule of nighttime attacks is not ironclad. That lesson alone is essential for Israel to drive home to Hezbollah. What is the current United States stance on Iran, on negotiations with Iran? The claim that when it comes to Iran, patience is wearing thin, that's the United States stand. The Biden administration has said that diplomatic efforts to get Iran back to the nuclear negotiations are the critical place, and the international patience with Iran delays in returning to the talks is wearing thin. U.S. Special Envoy for Iran, Robert Malley, told reporters that there is a deep and growing concern about Iran's continued intransigence and refusal to commit to a date to resume negotiations in Vienna. Malley said the U.S. and its partners want a diplomatic solution. He said the United States wants Iran back to comply with the 2015 nuclear deal. Malley also said that the United States will not, for a long time, let this go on. The United States is considering options other than purely diplomatic. Malley said, quoting here, "We are in a critical place," unquote. He said that talks with Iran in Vienna were suspended after the 6th round in June because of Iran's presidential elections, and then stalled again as Iran installed their new Iranian president, Ibrahim Raisi. But Raisi has been in office since August. Enough time has passed for Iran to decide on a policy. At this point, it's hard to find an innocent explanation as to why it's taking so long, Malley said. The plan B being implemented right now appears to be the Iranian one, and that's something we have to be prepared for. This is not looking good for the West, I must say. Hamas controls Gaza, and they have just sentenced 6 people to death for collaborating with Israel. According to Islamist terror group's military court, it issues sentences against a number of informants, including 6 death sentences. Other sentences vary between life terms and temporary hard labor, and 1 acquittal. Intel assets, or collaborators, are an essential part of war, every war. Local Gazans volunteer to help Israel. They get paid. They deliver essential information that cannot be culled from hacking or cyber spoofing. But it's dangerous work. Hamas deems it betrayal. The essential point here is that many people, many Gazans, do not support Hamas, so much so that they are willing to risk their own lives and their families' lives in order to help Israel. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquant piece of information. Did you know that Shechitah, or Jewish ritual slaughter, is a modern, highly technical industry today? Gone are the days when you bought a single chicken and took it to the shochet, and the shochet shechted it. Today, Shechitah falls into 2 large categories. One category is for fowl, for chickens and turkeys especially, and the other is for large animals, mostly cows. So 2 categories, chickens and cows. Almost no individual or private shechitah takes place in America today. A rare exception might take place sometimes in a far-flung area where a Chabad shaliach will shecht a chicken. But that is few and far between and almost unheard of. because it's really industrial now. The issue we discussed earlier is not only a practical issue, it's an issue of principle. The fact that Shechitah is uncommon in certain countries should not translate into outlawing an ancient Jewish practice. It should not. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.